Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be looking at the ability Cold Mastery. Now, Cold Mastery is one of those odd abilities that does a very specific thing, and that's all it does. But it doesn't work the same as Lightning Mastery or Fire Mastery. Instead of increasing the overall damage of the fire or the lightning spells like Fire and Lightning Mastery do, Cold Mastery instead opts for a different way to increase the damage that you dish out for cold, and that is to reduce the resistance of the monster that you are instead attacking. Now, Cold Mastery is a very interesting thing because you don't really need to beef it up too high, and I'll explain why. So what we have to do is we have to go over resistances, and we have to go over breaking resistances. So first off, let's cover negative resistance. So here we have the 4 abilities in the game that apply a negative resistance effect. The ones that we are looking at specifically are Conviction and Lower Resistance. And you will see that Conviction applies a negative 150% resistance, and Lower Resist applies a negative 70% resistance. Cold Mastery has a negative resistance, which goes up extremely high, and if we max it out at level 30 right here with our plus to skills, you'll see it is at negative 165% enemy cold resistance. So how much negative resistance do we specifically need? Well, that's the question, right? Conviction and Lower Resist can break resistances, however, Cold Mastery cannot. But Cold Mastery can work in conjunction with Conviction and Lower Resistance. The only problem is that the majority of the monsters that are cold immune are usually unbreakably cold immune. And this is a rather big issue for cold sorceresses in general, because usually when they come across a cold immune monster, there's no way to kill them with cold damage. And I'm going to go over really quickly how you can tell what resistances a monster has. So this is the modifiers for monsters. As you can see, Stone Skin applies a 50% physical resistance. Fire, Cold, and Lightning Enchanted apply 75% of that particular resistance. We also have Magic Resistant, which gives a 40% resistance to Fire, Cold, and Lightning. Spectral Hit is 20% to Fire, Cold, and Lightning, and the monsters can only be immune to 2 enemy things at a time. You also have to take into account the monster's base resistances. So for instance, if a monster normally has 50% cold resistance, then when they have something like Cold Enchanted, 50% plus 75% is going to put them over 100%, which means they will now be immune. Same thing with something like Magic Resistant and Spectral Hit. That's 40 plus 20, so 40, 50, 60 plus the 50% natural resistance, and now they are unbreakably immune. Cold resistance, or rather negative resistance, can only go as low as negative 100%. So because Cold Mastery is applying a negative to any monster that you come across, the highest that you would ever need, and this is assuming you come across a monster that is 99% cold resistant, which can happen. Let's say, for instance, you come across a monster that is 99% cold resistant. The highest percent negative resistance that you would ever need is negative 199%. Or you could round that off nicely at 200%. To get to negative 200% enemy cold resistance on Cold Mastery, you are looking at 200% at level 37. Level 37, you can calculate in plus to skills and things like that. So if you happen to have a large number of plus to skills, which most sorceresses tend to have a large number of plus to skills, you will most likely be looking at not putting in 20 points into Cold Mastery. So calculate that out in advance. You can also go a little bit lower than 200%. You don't necessarily have to be at 200% exactly. In fact, you could bring that down a little bit, maybe to 180% to be more realistic, because how often are you going to come across monsters that are 99% resistant to cold, and you can use your Cold Mastery against them? It's not that often. So bringing it down to a more realistic level of 180% would be a little bit better. But what this does is it multiplies out your damage. So when you attack a monster with a skill, like for instance, Glacial Spike, which, let's go ahead and beef up all the synergies real quick. So Ice Blast, and then of course Blizzard. And we even have a Frozen Orb synergy. So we're looking at 1,577 to 1,676. However, if a monster is negative 100% on his cold resistance, he will take effectively double damage, which means that our 1,500 there, 1,500 to 1,600, is going to be doing 3,000 to 3,200, which is a lot higher damage than what is actually being represented. Cold Mastery is one of those things that just really, 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 really works out nicely. The other interesting thing about Cold Mastery is that because it applies a negative resistance, you can utilize plus cold skill damage very effectively. So plus cold skill damage is something that exists on a myriad of items in the game, like for instance, Nightwing's Veil, Rainbow Facets, I believe also the Tal Rasha's set, I believe, has a little bit of cold plus skill damage on it. There is a myriad of items throughout the game that will give plus cold skill damage, and that plus cold skill damage sort of functions as a pseudo cold mastery in the way that lightning mastery works and fire mastery works, and instead of applying negative resistance, applies plus skill damage. And because any damage that you output is already being doubled, because the Cold Mastery is reducing their resistance by negative 100%, the Cold Mastery is effectively getting twice the effectiveness. Think about it like this. If I add 100 damage to Glacial Spike with plus cold skill damage, the negative 100% cold that is being applied to the target, so the target is now at negative 100% cold resistance, that 100 is being multiplied to 200. And so I am getting a really, really nice effectiveness from that kind of stuff. You can also calculate in items like Rainbow Facets and negative cold resistance equipment. So if you come across any kind of item in the game that applies a negative cold resistance, you can subtract that from the cold mastery that you need. Let's say, for instance, you were using 4 Rainbow Facets that give negative 5% cold resistance per Rainbow Facet. That would be a total of 5, 10, 15, 20. So it would be 20% negative to resistance, and you could subtract that from the cold mastery that you need. So instead of being at level 37, you could be at level 33, which is 180. Instead of being at level 33, if you were shooting for the 180% mark, you could instead be at level 29, which is 160, and you could save yourself some skill points in Cold Mastery, which then could be used to beef up something else instead, which is very, 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 very effective. The other very interesting thing about Cold Mastery that I don't think a lot of people know is that it also applies to physical damage. So if I am a sorceress, why did I say Amazon? If I am a sorceress that is wielding a weapon, let's say, for instance, I have on a Baronera's Star. The Baronera's Star has elemental damage on it. So what is happening here is that I'm hitting somebody with a weapon. The weapon is applying fire, lightning, or cold damage, and the fire, lightning, or cold damage is being multiplied by my masteries. So you'll notice that if I reset my character, let's go ahead and reset my character real quick just for fun. Actually, I don't even have any points in lightning or fire mastery. Let's go ahead and beef these up, shall we? You'll notice that when I beef up fire and lightning mastery, my damage goes up pretty considerably. I can reset this real quick to show you again how this works. So we go ahead and put the strength and dex in that's required for the weapon. What is it, 143? Alright, so I have, with no masteries, I have 1,284, which is, of course, 200 plus 200 plus 200 and the physical damage. So we have 600 elemental damage, and we have about 600 physical damage. And if you take the masteries and you put them into effect, you will notice that the damage goes up considerably, And also, the Cold Mastery can apply a negative resistance to the target, which is going to effectively double the cold damage that this outputs as well. So instead of doing 200 cold damage, we're doing 400. Instead of doing 200 lightning damage, we're doing 200 lightning damage plus 326%. And instead of doing 200 fire damage, we're doing 200 fire damage plus 191%. And in this way, the Sorceress can utilize Cold, Fire, and Lightning Mastery very interestingly. There actually is a build, I actually call it the Elementress. The Elementress utilizes the Fire, Cold, and Lightning Masteries, which actually are not tied to any other skills, and builds a massive amount of elemental damage utilizing items, charms, and enchant to build up her fire, lightning, and cold damage as high as humanly possible, and then multiplies that fire, lightning, and cold damage by using her lightning mastery, fire mastery, and cold mastery. And this is a very interesting way that you can utilize abilities in probably ways that they never intended, which is very, very cool. Now, because you do have to apply this in a physical way. What I mean by physical is not physical damage. What I mean by physical is you actually have to swing a weapon or you have to shoot a bow. You actually have to apply this damage in some way like this. And this actually allows you to think up some very interesting builds. Like, for instance, you could use Widowmaker Bow, which has Guided Arrow. A Guided Arrow is a guaranteed hit. And then you could, of course, build up your elemental damage from there. And every single time you fire your bow, all of your elemental damage would be applied to a particular target. Amiss if I did not point out the other uses of the Cold, Lightning, and Fire Mastery, which is basically utilizing them for the auras. So there are Holy Freeze, Holy Fire, and Holy Shock auras, which can be obtained through items, and your Cold Mastery, Fire Mastery, and Lightning Mastery will have a really nice effect on those as well, increasing the damage that those can output. I think I've covered just about everything I can for Cold Mastery, and if you are a Cold Sorceress, you definitely do need Cold Mastery, but consider that you don't need to max it out. You just need 200%. 180 to 200% is kind of your goal mark there, because anything higher than that is really just a waste. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and keep watching.